I like Larry's picture the best.
It's one of our newsroom specials.
Hey, Russ, your employees are giving me a hard time.
Fire them immediately.
Well, hello and greetings to all. It is exactly straight up 12 noon Eastern Daylight Savings Time or Eastern Standard Time. Would someone please let me know, because I've been making that mistake lately. It's EST right now, is it not? Oh no, Daylight Savings Time. We move on later, but it's 12 noon on the East Coast. We want to welcome all of our friends to this expert panel today, hosted by Editor and Publisher Magazine. Good afternoon or good morning, depending upon your time zone. I'm Mike Blinder, publisher of ENP. And before we get started with our panel, I'd like to introduce my co-host for today, Mark Hall, president of the International Newspaper Group. Mark, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, thank you. Good to
Okay,
see
good.
everybody attending, and hope everybody's well.
Great. Why don't you take it from here and tee off our expert panel today as we discuss the future of newsprint in our industry today.
Okay, welcome to 2020 ING Virtual Summit in this new and adaptive world. A special thanks to our partners, American Newspapers, Pivot 2020, and Editor and Publishing. They've been instrumental in bringing this format to all of you. I trust you're all safe and coping with these unusual times. Who would have known a year ago that we would have been facing such uncertainty and such diversification of our industry? I just want to outline our mission statement for 2021. This is road to recovery and stability. I think this is important in how we overcome everything that we've been facing. The need to share practices that help all newspaper operations overcome these turbulent times will make our industry more resilient, adaptive, and relevant in the future. Encouraging and recognizing individuals and teams across our areas for their dedication will foster a broader confidence to all of us. It is important to filter the barrage of negativity and stay focused to what you can influence and control. Then discard the rumors and misconceptions to reduce fear. The sense of stability and confidence to move in the right direction will become evident. I think this is going to be an interesting year on how all of us are able to change the way things have been happening, keep our teams safe, keep them motivated, and get them through this next year. I want to thank all our sponsors as a group. A very special thank you to all our event, platinum, gold, and silver sponsors for providing the support for the virtual event and coming to the ING 2021 next year will be the pinnacle. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to introduce Wayne Pelland from Gannett and the current ING Vice President. Over to you, Wayne.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mike. I'm so excited about this event today. I really think we've put together a great topic that everybody can have some general interest in. I'm the Senior Vice President of Publishing Ops in Gannett. Really enjoy that role, and I have a great team that I get to work with. So before we get into our topic, I really just wanted to say a couple words about the All-Star Awards. It really hit home, and I just thought it was just a great thing that was done. Our two winners, the regional winner, Stephen Infinger, and all the great things that they're doing in the villages. It was just great to see the people supporting them there and how happy everybody was when he got that award. It was just really great. From the outside, it just looked like just a fabulous organization that they have there. And I know that our people that the group that we had to pick from was just really, really outstanding. And then the national winner, John Morey, who I get to work with more directly. I just can't say enough about his leadership characteristics, what he's done in Detroit under the leadership of Jack Saunders over the last 4 or 5 years. And then the things that we've asked him to do in the last 8 or 9 months, and the way that he's handled it has just been amazing. So it's great to have people like that to work with, and it just had to recognize these people. So moving to our topic, I'm excited about the group of people that we have with us today. I want to thank Gannett, New York Times, Dow Jones, Page Cooperative, and White Birch for participating in this event. I think we have a good mix of individuals who have a lot of industry knowledge and experience, and we're going to be able to share some topics that are really important to everybody. No matter what you do in your organization, whether you're managing a press operation or you're in a leadership role or an executive, these are things that are just going to impact our businesses over the next few years. That are going to be significant to you. So the more you know about it and understand different people's perspectives, I think it's going to be key to some of your successes in the future. We're going to turn to, going to introduce the rest of our team first. So I'm going to turn it over to Russ Lauder. He's going to introduce himself. He's the Executive Vice President of White Birch. So Russ, if you could do an intro of yourself, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Wayne. As Wayne said, I'm Russ Lauder, Executive Vice President of White Birch Paper. I've been with White Birch for about 12 years now. Previous to that, I served my time at, I won't call it a sentence, but I served my time at Gannett for 15 years, working in a similar role to what Frank does now. Thank you very much for having me. I think it's very important that you as a group and we as an industry collectively understand what has happened to us this year and what we think the path forward might be. So thank you again. Lisa?
My name is Lisa Tanner. I am the Director of Paper and Production Services at the New York Times Company. I've been with the organization for roughly 19 years. And prior to that, I actually worked for a paper supplier, previously known as Abitibi Price. Now, after multiple mergers, Resolute Forest Products. My main responsibilities are paper purchasing and for College Point and 26 of our national edition print sites, and also responsible for multiple printers and purchasing paper for our various New York Times Magazine products. So on to you, Larry.
Thank you, Lisa. Larry Hoffman, I'm Vice President of Production for the Wall Street Journal. My day job involves print operation at the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, New York Post, and we have 7 owned and operated facilities. We have 1 international contracted facility in Japan, and then we have 21 contracted print operations in the US. What I like to refer to as my part-time and day and night job is helping News Corp with the paper procurement. I either directly procure paper or kind of act as a consulting person for the News Corp other business units. Those obviously include the Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones publications, the New York Post, HarperCollins books, and then I also work with the News UK and News Australia folks. More of on a consulting basis because they have people in their operations that handle day-to-day procurement. So kind of a regular day job and then a part-time job on the newsprint side. So I'll be kind of balancing both production and paper purchasing in this discussion. So Gary, on to you.
Thank you, Larry. My name is Gary Blakeley. I'm the CEO of Page Cooperative. I've been with Page since March of 2019. Prior to that, I was the director of global service and technical support for Southern Lithoplate. Previous to that, I worked at Olive Software as the general manager for a couple of years. And to show you that I can hold a job, I was at Freedom Communications for about 28 years prior to all of that, and that's when Freedom sold and I started moving elsewhere. At Freedom, I focused on both operations as the VP of Operations at the Gazette in Colorado Springs. Also did some time at the Orange County Register. Moved finally to corporate, was the director of procurement, operations, and was the chief safety officer for Freedom as I held for a number of years an approval from OSHA as a 1910 standard trainer. So that's my background. And Frank, over to you. Frank, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Frank O'Toole. I've been with Gannett 26 years, 16 of those in Gannett Supply and the rest in IT and finance. And I normally work out of our Tysons, Virginia office. I'm going to share a little bit about who Gannett Supply is. We're a procurement group that partners with business stakeholders like Wayne in an effort to increase our company's quality, efficiencies, and reducing cost, unifying our company's scale. Gannett Supply consists of a paper and a non-paper sourcing team. Our paper team manages the ordering and inventory management side of the business, while our non-paper team handles more traditional procurement and policy matters like travel, mobile, and software licensing agreements. Lately, we've been buying a lot of face masks and other safety equipment to help protect our employees as we all deal with this new normal. What do? Our paper team optimizes our newsprint supply chain for Gannett, our customers, and NewsQuest, which is Gannett's regional newspapers in the United Kingdom. We buy paper for about 220 press rooms around the country using a tool called Abinet, and then we use another cloud-based application called Coupa for most everything else. With that, I'm going to turn this back over to Wayne.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you, team. As you can see, we have a wonderful panel that's going to provide some great insight for us. I just find this a general interest point. I'm in North Kingstown, Rhode Island today. So next time our panel talks, just let us know where you all are. I just find it interesting when you're on these virtual type events. So the first question I'd like to throw out there is we're going to direct it back to Frank. And Frank, could you just kind of talk about the market and give us an overview of where newsprint is today from a market perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And if Greg can pull up, we have a slide on the market capacity. As an overview, I'm going to go through a few points that we think are relevant here. We all painfully aware of the world health issues that have wreaked havoc on the economy and newsprint consumption in particular as it relates to this topic. Demand continues to decline with both publishers and commercial printers. The drops due to COVID-19 have forced significant downtime and closures with no mention of restarts. The export markets are fragile with volatile demand. This is our market here in North America's biggest wild card, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Currency remains significantly more favorable for Canadian mills based on the stronger US dollar. Global newsprint demand is estimated at approximately 13.5 million tons for 2020, while here in North America, our demand is approximately 1.6 million tons. 1.3 million of those tons come from the United States, 300,000 demand out of Canada. As you can see from this slide, North American capacity, that's the mill's capacity to make newsprint, is estimated at 3.1 million tons. So just to kind of keep that in perspective, you've got the 3.1 million North American production capacity, and obviously our demand at 1.6. And go back to my mention of the biggest wild card being exports. While exports should be well over 1 million tons, they're currently very, very low. North American capacity estimated at 3.1 million tons for 2020. If we reduce that based on idled machines, you see a couple dots here in red for two machines, two mills that have been reported down, along with the closures that were announced most recently, Pend Oreille and Brompton from Kruger. The estimated capacity for 2021 should come in at 2.8 million tons. On the bright side, we look at our monthly orders and they are improving. October being our strongest month since the pandemic. We don't see demand returning to pre-pandemic levels. Although demand decline should be less bad year over year based on the historic declines that we're realizing this year that will come in, expected to come in at more than 30% lower on a year-to-date basis. We do expect machines that are currently down to become permanently down. And we expect more newsprint capacity to leave the market for other grades. The recovery of export markets, I'm referencing that 1 million ton or so gap between capacity and current demand levels, is critical to our North American producers and ultimately critical to all of us to have a healthy supply chain. Analysts have projected continued favorable Canadian currency rates, and our top 3 producers, Resolute, White Birch, Kruger, represent nearly 70% of the overall market capacity. Overseas, several producers, SCA, UPM, Stora Enso, have recently announced some 2 million tons of capacity closures in Europe. And as I mentioned earlier, there are multiple mills here in North America that are currently down and expected to stay down. And the 2 mills that were closed are not coming back. With that, maybe Russ can provide additional insights. Appreciate any questions.
And Russ, maybe you can touch on the worldwide market and the impact to North America in your discussions.
Sure. Yeah, as Frank said, we on the manufacturing side obviously have been equally impacted during this time frame, in not just the short term, but what was already a tough environment of making and selling newsprint in a just sort of cyclically declining world that we live in. We now find ourselves searching for what is the new normal. And there's several components to that as we see it. And as Frank alluded to, increasingly the health of our industry in North America is dependent upon the markets outside of the US and Canada. And I would say that to answer Wayne's question, what we've seen is that these markets have been impacted, if not equally, dramatically more than what we've seen in North America for a couple of different reasons. Their time to market from the paper that we are shipping to them from North America is substantially longer. You're not going to be any less than kind of 20 to 30 days at best from these people getting paper. So obviously they carry a much higher level of inventory. That is something that, as you all experienced and we experienced with you, the inventory that you thought you had in March and April, based on your calculation using your budgeted consumption, became 4 to 5 times what you thought you had on hand, because what you had to now use was a calculation based on your reality. Mm-hmm. And that is a moving target. What I would say is globally, we're getting to a point where we feel like we're over the hill and beginning to deal in real demand again. So less of an inventory question, but it is also a component of how these individual export markets, and I mean very individual by country, dealt with the pandemic and the lockdown. In certain markets like India, it was much more extreme. India is a major export market for North America and most other regions that do export. There, we saw customers in India whose demand would go down by 80 or 90% during this time frame. And they're cycling through their inventory right now. The Chinese demand has been bumpy. I would say they were a bit of a black hole at the beginning of this, and you're beginning to see that recover a little bit. And I would say that to Frank's point, that every month seems to get a little bit better. We're seeing the same thing from our end. Your world is our world, so it's good to talk to people and see that we're not hearing of dramatic improvement, but kind of a gradual recovery. And I think once we can more clearly identify what that the new normal is, it'll be a time frame where people in our side of the business will be able to kind of safely say, okay, this is the capacity that's needed to operate in a efficient, profitable way within the global newsprint market. And this much is not needed. as Frank says, I don't talk to many of my peers within the analyst community or anywhere else that believes that we are going to return to where things were pre-pandemic. It's just a matter of what is that now. And one of the things that I can share with you, if some of you didn't already know, that the way that paper companies operate, these are 24/7 operations. It's not a long-term viable solution for most paper mills to operate for 2 weeks up, 2 weeks down type of thing. Very, very, very difficult to make money. These machines are designed to get up and run and not stop except for maintenance. So I'll throw it back to you guys. I'm trying to answer or look at the questions as they come in as well.
So I'll throw this back at you. Couple questions, Russ, is what do you think that year over year the newsprint industry is down from a percentage?
2020 to 2019, it's you're staring down the barrel, I think, of something around 20 to 25%. And the only reason I would say that you're buoyed at that number would be the first quarter. So kind of pre-pandemic, you've seen some very extreme numbers over the summertime of, in excess of 30 or 35%. That is just so we can feel a little bit better about ourselves. That's not, it's not found solely in the newsprint/newspaper environment. We've seen this in magazines. You've seen it in other retail grades, obviously, as the retailers stopped printing and giving you the inserts to print. That's coming back. I think the general feeling, certainly in our shop, is okay. We've got what we've got. There's not a lot we can do to change that. They're dramatic numbers. It really puts a punctuation mark on the need to figure out this capacity and the kind of balance that the market needs. But I think, as I said, Wayne, I think we're getting closer to understanding what the reality is.
Thank you, Russ.
Wayne, there is a question about forecasts for 2021 out there.
Okay.
Yeah, and while you're looking at that, I will say one thing. Because I work with HarperCollins Books, the people that produce books, and there is bulky news, which is a similar product to newsprint. It's just a bulkier. Book producers were having a hard time in March, April, May, getting enough books produced. Some of that was due to the printing capacity. There were a few book producers that closed, one significant one. So that also contributed to not just what we're seeing on the newspaper side, but also just the general consumption of groundwood stock. That did not help the industry at all.
We also lost avenues to office copies being delivered to offices. We lost, newsstand sales. So all of that combined, as offices start to open up, as newsstands start to open up, we'll hopefully see a bit of an uptick in at least circulation numbers. That will help offset some of the drop in consumption.
And this is Frank. I'll just jump in that, from one of the questions that I see in the chat panel, a forecast on 2021 based on our own realizing, call it the 30% plus in current year. And what we have internally, we're projecting is low teens. So going into 2021, projecting low teens, optimistically, that could be upper single digits. I don't think any of us are sitting here saying that it won't be another continued decline, but on the lower end relative to what we're seeing of late, simply because of the severity of the current year's decline. So it'll be a favorable comparison.
Correct. And it's very, very hard to project. Nobody knows the implications of COVID, how long it's going to last. There are certain areas in advertising that are just extremely weak: luxury, retail, technology. You know, we've gone and looked at bringing sections together. So we have our sports and travel section are kind of consolidated within the paper. So it's really putting a plan forward, trying to predict what is going to happen with COVID. How quickly are people going to return to offices? How quickly are, you know, advertisers willing to start spending dollars related to all of these categories? And I think it's going to be a very, very difficult thing to project at this point.
I have a quick question for Russ, if I may. Russ, you're talking about the offshore market, and since that has such impact on supply here for the U.S. or potentially has severe impact, do you have any market intelligence on what folks are predicting in terms of recovery in offshore markets?
I would call, maybe I can try and segment them into sort of three areas, geographical areas. Europe would most likely resemble what we experience in the US and North American market most closely. Their numbers are very kind of similar to ours. The recovery, I think, is likely to look a lot like what you're talking about here. In the Asian markets, it's a little bit of a harder thing to peg, but what I would tell you, as I alluded to before, is that's going to feel more like a capacity closure, to put it into terms that we can understand, than anything else. These markets, they've been down so severely that when they come back up, it's going to feel like you've lost the paper machine. So they're not going to come back gradually because their drop in demand and consumption was so severe. When it comes back, it's coming back and it's going to look like 40, 50, 60,000 tons a month of demand. And I wouldn't call it new demand, it's just returning demand. The Latin American markets are a little bit harder to peg because I think it's got a higher degree of likelihood that you have, I'd call it just truly not returning demand that's more severe than what we see in the North American or European markets. Along with that, they have very, very limited home supply of newsprint. There's basically 3 machines that make newsprint in all of South and Central America. So whether or not those 3 would survive, my bet would be that at one minimum, probably 2 of them did not, potentially all 3, that would either close or move on to making other grades for packaging or some other purpose. And that would in some way dumb down that severity of decline. But I would expect that what we experience out of the export market is paper manufacturers. I won't say we're hanging our hopes on it, but we expect particularly that Asian demand, when it returns, to feel good to us.
Now, do you expect that to be sort of like in relative terms, a light switch type of return to what it was previously? Or are you prepared to handle that? And will other mills be prepared to handle that?
It could be a light switch. I don't, if I could answer that question decisively, I'd have another job on Wall Street. But I think it will feel a little bit like a light switch. It's just a matter of, we're not the only guys playing in that pool. There's people from all over the world that are there as well. It's going to be a matter of what have they done with their capacity in this time frame that we're all dealing with. Have they converted? Have they shut? Have they taken market-related downtime? Less permanent capacity measures?
One of the things, Russ, that I think, we both see very targeted and in the region that a mill comes out. And I think specifically about the United Kingdom and the announcement that UPM recently made about the sale of their Shotton mill there. That, to me, when that happens, I do think the light switch effect that you just talked about will occur in the very tight UK marketplace. That's one of two domestic producers there with Palm paper, and losing that much supply concentrated to a market will be quite significant. And then, you know, as that domino effect plays out, European supply that had been exporting to markets like India starts to retreat to closer to home markets in Europe. 2 million tons reportedly coming out by the end of this year, early next year, from those three producers mentioned, SCA, Stora, and UPM, is quite significant. And I think that ultimately starts to have a domino effect in terms of our Canadian producers who will fill that void in India and other markets around the world.
I have a question for Larry. Larry, with your experience and work with News Corp, can you give your perspective on the international marketplace?
Sure. And Russ mentioned the UK and then the continent. I agree that it acts very much like North America does, Canada and the US. Paper does move freely between those two markets. So we, News Corp, we buy from both sides of that market. We buy from suppliers in the UK, mostly Palm, but we also import paper in from the continent. Interestingly enough, I mean, you know, we kind of have dealt with the Brexit, issue in the UK for almost 2 years. We held additional supply in the UK because, you know, we weren't sure that there was, you know, at one point, it was almost a year, they were talking about a hard exit, and we didn't know if we would have trouble getting paper into that market. So we held a higher supply there than we normally would. And the EU and Britain, they still have to work out what their tariffs ultimately look like and how they're going to handle that transfer between the two markets. So we may see a little tightening because of that, and we may put a little more supply into the London area as we get closer to whatever's going to happen. The other place that I spend a fair amount of time on is Australia. Australia is a completely different market in and of itself. I mean, Australia is really, it's obviously a big country. There's a fair number of newspapers, but it's supplied by Norske. It's supplied by really one major company, and most of that supply comes from New Zealand. There was a little, more than a little bit of gnashing of teeth, or March and April when New Zealand shut down, and they literally shut down all of their paper manufacturing. They shut down all manufacturing. So we had to turn to some domestic supply coming out of Tasmania to get paper for our Australia operation. So I think Australia, and nobody mentions it in the world market because it's kind of an ecosystem onto itself. But there could be some more movement I'll say into, because I don't see it out of that region. There could be some more movement into that region over the next few years, depending on what Norske ends up doing.
Thank you, Larry. So we've talked a lot about the marketplace, and I want to remind everybody, which I should have done earlier, please use the chat function to send your questions in, and we'll gladly try to weave them into our discussions. We're hoping that happens. Let's shift to some inventory type questions. There was a question about plant consolidations. What do we see from our experiences will happen with plant consolidations? I'll take that one to start and then throw it out to the committee. I see it continuing, and why were there so many in 20? I think it was the Gatehouse-Gannett merger led to a lot of consolidations, the overall impacts of COVID. I think the McClatchy bankruptcy. I think we had an extraordinary amount of these types of activities. Something I'll throw out to Lisa and Larry perhaps is, when you see these consolidations in plants that you're printing, what sort of things go through your mind? And I think I can read Larry's mind, and what do you see? How does that impact your world? Let's start with Lisa.
Well, I mean, the first question is, where is the print order going to go? That would be the first question, just to make sure that we have, our subscribers still can get their paper product on time. We basically work with a team. We have to work with our circulation group. We have to work with the mills to make sure that we have enough paper on hand to kind of keep the print order going to all of our subscribers. So it's kind of twofold. The first is when the announcement happens, what is the time frame? Trying to minimize inventory that is left on the ground so we don't have to try to find an alternate home. And then the second really is where is it going to go, and making sure that we have sufficient product and everybody is on board to get the paper to the customers. And we've had quite a few of those over this past year.
Yes, we have, and Wayne, I mean, Lisa covered a lot of the same things that we deal with. It's really, the question on the manufacturing side is, okay, where are you going to manufacture? What additional trucking do you have to put in? But interestingly enough, we see is probably a bigger impact on newspapers, publishers who are reducing print days. When somebody comes to us and says, okay, we're going to eliminate the Monday product or the Thursday product or the Saturday product, the Wall Street Journal, we use a lot of newspapers as our source to market. They deliver our products, and all of a sudden, even though they're still printing, they'll still, some of these folks are saying, we'll print your product, but we're not going to print our product, and we're not going to deliver this, these days a week. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to get our product to market when people shut down one or two or more print days a year or a week. That's probably a bigger issue that we're facing right now. I think we're going to continue to see closures as print plant closures as publishers kind of rationalize their local business. I don't think that's going to change over the next few years.
Thank you. Very informative. Gary, as you look at the impacts of COVID to some of your buying group, what were some of the biggest events or issues that they came across for some of the medium to smaller press rooms?
Yeah, I think the largest thing is just trying to maintain profitability. I mean, that's the big issue. That's the huge thing out there that everybody realizes, not a lot of folks, actually overtly talk about, but you find that people are trimming the number of days, they're trimming their circulation area, trimming number of pages. So those are the challenges that we're having. And, Page is just trying to help folks, even with consolidation. Our first question is, are you consolidating within a corporate entity, or are you going to be outsourcing to another business? And trying to be able to accommodate them in that way to help protect them. As we know, and we don't talk about it, and we won't hear, but Page is a purchasing cooperative, and it's based upon trying to level the playing field, economically for people. So that's our big goal, is trying to make sure when they do trim, when they do have to ship, that we're there to help them out. But it can be very problematic, and people lose a lot of sleep over it these days, understandably.
Earlier on, somebody mentioned how their inventory, I think it was Russ, dramatically shot up during COVID. Boy, we certainly saw that. Back in my younger days, when I first started ordering inventory, I remember one of the people I reported to told me, if you mess this up, you're going to be looking for employment somewhere else. So I always tended to keep a high amount of tons in the building, right, Frank?
That's right. Yeah, no, our last day of ordering paper is the day we run out of paper. So the ink has to hit paper, not the floor, as they say. And we absolutely, I mean, this year in particular wreaked havoc. We, all had the uncertainty in early March of what does this Canadian border closing mean to us? And, they're saying that trade won't be impacted, but it was a very strange, almost Twilight Zone kind of experience, right? And we were receiving orders for the month of April in early March, and ultimately returning with the question of, should we start to bulk up? We just didn't know what the next shoe to drop was going to be, and there were drivers that were being stopped because they didn't have masks. There were drivers just not willing to go to press rooms because they heard of a case or an outbreak in a particular area. So yeah, we bought real strong for the month of April, and then the months that followed were very, very difficult to climb our way back out of that huge amount of paper that we had built up just from the 1 month, and then the seismic drop off that was following. So I think we're really starting to be out of that mess now. October, as I mentioned, our strongest month of orders since pandemic, and you know, it's encouraging as we see these glimmers of hope with our monthly orders coming in better month over month. We just knock on wood that it continues and that we don't see another setback.
Thank you. Let's talk about basis weight for a little bit. Lisa, what do you see as the trend of for basis weight in the marketplace? And I know you guys have a different perspective on that sometimes, so I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
Sure. I think we're probably one of the few that is exclusively still on 45 gram. We have not made the transition over to the lower basis weights, just based on some opacity concerns that we've had in the past. I know that it's been very, very successful across the board with many press rooms, but it's just something that we haven't really looked at as a viable option based on today's print order that we have.
And do you, as far as supplying your press rooms, you have a large number of press rooms, as does Dow Jones across North America. Do you intend to always supply your own newsprint, and give your perspective on that?
The game plan is for us to continue to supply all of our 26 national edition print sites. And we have very, very good relationships with multiple suppliers within the marketplace. And we've had, just like Gannett, we have the Abinet system where we're able to manage inventory levels. We have a lot of conversations with our print sites regarding inventory, provide guidance on order placement from month to month. So it's really a very, very close communication with all of the properties to make sure that their needs are being met.
Thank you. Larry, how about your perspective on basis weight?
Yeah, we're kind of in the same situation that the New York Times is in. I mean, we generally use 45 gram paper. We do use 43 gram on the West Coast. That sheet is a different sheet out there, just because the wood is, you know, it's different wood. It lends itself to a little higher opacity and probably a little more brightness. So out there we've migrated to 43 because that's what the suppliers really are geared up to supply. But on the East Coast, kind of the Rocky Mountains East, we're almost exclusively on 45 gram. If we get involved with a small printer and it just doesn't seem to make sense to take, you know, a roll off and put a roll on to switch basis weight, we'll work with the printers to, you know, to do what we need to do, so we're not causing, you know, them harm or delaying our product to market. But I think it's fair to say the sheet is significantly different between East and West. We also work very closely with the printers. We give them, you know, we look at how much paper we're going to need based just to print our product. Interestingly enough, though, I've certainly seen more distress calls. Both I have way too much paper. You know, what do we do? And probably more recently, I don't have enough paper. You know, I'm going to run out in 10 days. Fortunately, you know, when you have the latter call, we're able to work with the mills, and in some cases we'll say, okay, delay making paper for this plant of ours and make it for the contract printer and get it shipped out. So as long as we know far enough in advance, we obviously work with the contract printers to keep them supplied. But as I think everybody here saw this summer, everybody was awash in paper, and it was a matter of trying to get it out of the warehouses. And I think we were also seeing a few suppliers changing some modes of transportation. And we see that based on, what does rail cost? And some of the rail costs are, they go up and down, and I'm not sure any of us can understand how any rail company sets their pricing. But obviously the folks at the mill are looking at it saying, well, wait a minute, now it's less expensive to ship by rail into this area, or it's less expensive to truck by ship or boat or however, and they'll come to us and they'll say, well, we want to change the mode of transportation. And that does kind of mess up the printer on the other end, because then they're all of a sudden being thrown another distribution channel that they might not be used to.
Well, I think also, I mean, the one thing that I've noticed in the past few months is also with the paging changes, any kind of indications of what your fractional usage was is out the door. So a lot of the printers are calling and saying it's not the full sizes that they need, it's the dinkies, or it's the 3/4. So those are things that we're trying to work with the press rooms so they can anticipate these things or try to keep an eye on the situation, because they're used to being able to just pick up the phone and say, I need a truck and I need it next week. Well, with the amount of downtime being taken, mill closures, increased transit times, it's not as easy as it used to be. So it's kind of changing the mind to say we need to be a little bit more prepared in advance and not wait till the last minute.
Wayne, this is Frank. I'll just jump in on basis weight. Our own mix, we're at just shy of 50% of our orders are 40 gram. So 48% of our year-to-date orders have been 40 gram basis weight. 40% have been 45 gram. Just over 6% 43 gram, and a very, very small amount, 4% at 48.8. We by and large in our own operations, we're on 40 gram, but we have recently been asked by a producer if we would move back to 45 gram because of some of their own ability to manufacture 45 gram better than the 40 gram sheet. And we're trying to work together with our suppliers to strike that right balance. And so just as with anything, we're trying to find the right mix, but we have had good success with 40 gram within our organization.
Having gone through the transition with you, we were probably 30% 40 gram as we merged the legacy Gatehouse, and you were probably a little bit higher, the legacy Gannett side. Yeah. And then we're probably above 90%, I would guess right now, Frank. Is that a good number?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of concern from our ops people about running the 40 gram newsprint. And, once their pressmen are trained, they know their tensions, they understand the paper, they're not switching back and forth. They understand, particularly with the fractionals, that's where some of our sites had some difficulty, or we needed some folder work to be able to run it. Yeah. Once that's settled down, people got more comfortable with it, and it doesn't even come up as a topic right now. Yeah. So we've completely adapted to all of that. I know, having been involved with a few acquisitions in the past, when we'd come into a plant and see 48.8, it was like running cardboard through the folder when you're not accustomed to seeing that. It's interesting. But
Wayne, real quick, I have a question. So people adapted to the lower basis weight, and it became a new normal. Did a higher number of breaks per 100, did that become a new normal too, or is it pretty flat from where it was?
I'd say it's fairly flat, Gary, but that's a good question. Initially, it went way up, and it depends on the supplier. So each supplier is a little bit different. So I'll give Russ a plug here. In one of our mills, one of our plants I'm most familiar with, the plant just runs better with Staticona newsprint, and so we try to be selective in our finicky plants, and that particular product just runs great. I think I could run 20 gram in Providence if it was from Staticona. So it's just like once you get your sets done, we definitely return, to answer your question, we definitely return to our normal in almost all of our facilities.
But if we want to, we know we can replace that Stadacona in a heartbeat.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. The check is in the mail. No, just to give you some, maybe put a pin in the basis weight from the manufacturing side. The reality is that just like press rooms, every paper machine is different. And you're talking about, if you make the jump straight from 45 gram to 40 gram, you are, taking in excess of 10% of the fiber out of the sheet. And, not every paper machine is, well maintained and well capitalized. It's been tougher and tougher over the last 10 years to, I'm not speaking on behalf of White Birch, but just industry wise, justify capital going into, old mills. So what we had found, and call it luck or just positioning wise, we were very familiar at 2 of our 3 mills with light basis weight when the trend began. From the Susie mill, we had been making and shipping in excess of 30 or 40,000 tons a year into export markets at 40 gram, and Stadacona was previously had 1 machine dedicated to the directory business, which obviously lends itself to more of a competency and familiarity in dealing in the lighter basis weights. So we had some institutional knowledge there. We have watched other mills really struggle, whether it was experience or equipment with getting there. But it's an important thing to point out that, before you jump off the cliff, you want to know who you're dealing with and what kind of quality changes you can expect.
From Page's perspective, the vast majority of our customers use 45 gram. And I was just wondering, as we talk about, lowering to 43 or even 40, does anyone have any stats or any feedback from, even if it's anecdotal, from readership to say, we don't like the lighter basis weights? Is it noticeable? Are advertisers, opposed to it? Do we have any feedback from the people that actually pick up the product?
So I'll take that one, having converted, 50 plants over the last 9 months to 40 gram newsprint. I can count them on 2 hands of the complaints that I've had, Gary. And it's really been insignificant. And advertising complaints, very far and few between. Those couple isolated cases would have some. Frank, how about you? Do you get complaints?
We don't, but just like anything, it takes time. And I think you said it, that the press rooms, once they learn it and they develop the expertise on the tensions running the machines, and it's a combination of, like you said about the Stadacona sheet. We see great quality from all of our producers at this time, but there are always nuanced preferences between a press room and a mill. And we try to do our best to make sure that we're putting the optimized sheet for that press room. We talked in years past about newsprint not being fungible, and really it isn't. It's a very customized product for that press room. And we get questioned from time to time about the, bringing paper in from offshore. And I'll just comment quickly on that, our cores here in North America don't lend themselves very well to universal compatibility with the offshore producers. North American producers have really dialed it in. They know what our press rooms need, and it makes it quite difficult to just interchange product seamlessly. Larry,
how about from a quality perspective? What's your view on 40 gram newsprint?
Well, again, we don't we really don't use 40 gram. We did some tests a few years ago, and it was internal. It wasn't print on it, send it out to advertisers and customers and get their feedback. We did tests. We did internal tests, kind of blind studies. Which paper, printing, which paper do you like best? We made a decision again to stick with a higher basis weight. And actually looking at, I had our continuous improvement group put together some numbers because I kind of wanted to. I hadn't looked at them, over several years in a while, and I was actually a little bit surprised. I was actually expecting brightness to have decreased, but between 2015 and 2020, we actually saw a little bit of dipness in brightness, but it's actually higher now than it was in 2015. Conversely, you get a little bit lower opacity, obviously, when that happens. So brightness has actually increased. I was not expecting that opacity decreased, which goes along with the brightness. I also looked at web breaks, and this kind of goes to the runnability across 45 gram paper. We're not seeing any significant change in web breaks. And generally, when we have a press that's experiencing more web breaks, we look internally. We look at, what are the settings? What are the water settings? I call up a guy I have that works on our control systems. I'll say, Jorg, go in and look and see what this press room is set up. And generally, we find the equipment settings have changed. Very, very rarely do we go back to a mill and say, you have this problem. Although it does happen. I mean, generally, those types of things we're seeing is transportation damage. Again, different modes of transportation. Maybe some paper being shipped further on rail cars. We do see that type of issue. But those are generally identifiable kind of out of the box, out of the wrapper, if you will. Most of the runnability issues we see are related to press setup.
Thank you. What about recycled content? Anyone care to comment about the future of recycled content in our newsprint?
Well, I mean, go ahead, Frank.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, currently there are really no mills within North America that have any form of recycle percentage. I do know that there's certain states that we still have to file regardless of what's available in the marketplace. I personally don't think that this is really going to be an ongoing topic. I think it's something that our municipalities have done a very, very good job in collecting the product, not ending up in the landfill. So I personally don't think that this is going to be an ongoing challenge.
So I'll jump in and say that, Gannett still files reports for recycled content, just like I think Lisa's alluding to here, that Arizona, California, Texas, and Maryland are the states that we still report. We do not realize penalties because we report exemptions. So simply put, to Lisa's point, there's really not pervasive recycled content available. Overseas in the UK, 100% recycled mills like Palm Paper, who's a key supplier to us in the United Kingdom. So we do still collectively have recycled, and my understanding is Inland still has a 25% recycled content for their newsprint. NORPAC can provide recycled content in their newsprint. They're not 100% recycled mills. These are virgin fiber mills with O&P as a part of their furnish. But my latest is I think NORPAC would charge a premium for the use of recycled, while Inland, I believe it's part of their standard production operation to have that small percentage of recycled. But to your point, it's become somewhat of an extinct component of our North American supply chain, unfortunately.
Yeah, Wayne, the only other thing I'll kind of throw in is, and obviously we all see the effect of China's kind of ban on taking recycled paper over the last year. I do kind of have a concern as municipal waste collection efforts have difficulty, or if they continue to have difficulty accepting recycled paper and getting rid of it at what they consider a profit. I do have a concern that the issue may raise its ugly head again, not because it's an environmental issue, not because it makes a lot of sense, but just because, and this is how it was really raised about 20 years ago, is municipalities were having difficulty with their landfills. I do get concerned that could raise its head again. So we all, I think, have to be aware and keep track of what's going on in our local communities and states.
Well, I also think, if I'm not mistaken, the beginning of this year, New York State had a proposed legislation that they were trying to pass where they would actually put the ownership on publishers to make sure that those papers were collected and not ended up in a landfill. Thank goodness it didn't go that far, but it's something that we as a group of publishers need to be aware that down the line, it may end up in our court.
Agreed. Yeah, and Lisa, I think just as we saw with New Jersey, and I'm not in New Jersey today. I'm actually in the Hudson Valley, but in New Jersey, when I think it was 2 weeks ago, when the legislature passed a ban on paper bag usage. I mean, they were targeting plastic bag usage, but along with it, they put out a ban on paper bags. Now, I haven't seen whether the governor actually signed that piece of legislation or not, but that kind of might indicate that somebody who thinks they're doing something good is not necessarily doing something good.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk a little bit about inventory? Because a lot of us touched on it here and there. So I'm going to go to Gary and say, Gary, what, as concerning fractionals, order time, downtime, plant closures, excess inventory, what are the kind of the most things that you have to deal with when you're dealing with all the sites that you have and the different issues that they have coming up with various suppliers?
One of the issues that we've had, and if there's unexpected downtime, that's certainly a problem. People are trying to order right now from anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. We're recommending 6 weeks. We're trying to talk to people about at least keeping a 45-day inventory on hand. As everybody talked about, it could be a career ending to run out of paper. So we don't want to do that. But we're looking at 4 to 6 weeks. And the other thing too is not just keeping the inventory in place and the problems that we can have with delivery. But obviously, there's such a variance right now in terms, an economic variance, and you don't know where it's going to be. You don't know if it's going up. You don't know what's going down. So we people need to be cognizant of that too. We can't really make any recommendations. Nobody really has a crystal ball, but those are factors that we have to consider. So, but so far, I've got to say, except for a couple of instances, I have not seen any panic, with our members, and we deal with 200 corporate members and 450 something print sites. Everybody has been pretty solid, and all the mills have been very responsive. A couple of problems, if the member can't work it out directly with the mill, they call us to see if we can do any kind of intervention. But it hasn't been traumatic for the members of Page so far.
Okay, that is good to hear. Lisa, you talked about the fractionals changed. I've seen that in a lot of our facilities also.
Yes.
Anything else from an inventory perspective?
Well, I mean, on a normal basis, what we like to do is kind of keep a rolling 30-day inventory. So we kind of take a look at what's, at the plant and what's in transit and try to keep a rolling 30-day based on projected consumption, given out on a 90-day basis. So we haven't really run into any issues, but like Larry had pointed out, you need to kind of be in constant contact with the supplier, because if the mode of transportation is changing and instead of getting in something via truck or rail direct, it's being cross-stocked, all of a sudden your 10-day transit time has become 21 days. Or depending on what mill you're getting your paper from, if you work with a group is like a supplier that has multiple mill locations, if you're getting your product from one location versus another, it could change your transit time by 2 weeks. So you really just have to be very, very aware of where the paper is coming from, what the mode of transportation is, and just kind of reiterate to all the press rooms that like our norm is right now, we would be placing our orders for November. And then, so we like to place our orders in advance, just in case I got a call from a supplier the other day saying, we're taking the machine down first 2 weeks. So if you didn't have your order in, you're not getting it for another 2 weeks. So these are the types of things, it's a very fluid situation, so you just kind of have to kind of keep on top of it. But on average, it's about 30 days.
30 days,
Yeah.
okay. Frank, can you speak to Gannett from a supply perspective?
Absolutely. As it relates to inventory, we think about, we have established for, all of Gannett and our customer locations, we have a primary and a secondary supplier, which we believe to be very, very important. We try to make sure that each of our sites have trialed the backup so that we're not, if somebody does have a downtime or, it could be natural disaster, could be, any number of factors that we're trying to mitigate for. And as unfortunately, as mills close, the average transit times are only getting longer. So we not only have primary, secondary, we also try to have established the lead time for an order for each of our locations, which drives increased, if you're several days away from getting paper, we need to have those contingencies. We try to map out where are we going to be able to, get an emergency load transferred from another location if need be. So we, like everyone, we're trying not to tie up cash on paper. We are averaging north of 30 days. We certainly try to manage those inventory levels as it relates to each of the sites' various considerations. But downtime from the mills, having primary and secondary is key, and constant communication, making sure that our mills are giving us that update when there is an expected delay, and then working with the site to work through contingencies. It's an ongoing process for my team.
I think the closure of Pend d'Oreille was a good example of how well people adapt in this market, because at least at Page, we found out maybe a week, maybe 10 days that they were closing, and all of the folks that we had at Page that were buying from Pend d'Oreille, we were quickly able to recover. And I think in today's market, considering how much we needed to get paper onto the mills and get these machines running, I think that speaks exactly to what's going on, at least in today's market. So when Pend d'Oreille closed, it was not a miss in terms of someone running out of paper. And I think it just shows where the market is right now.
Yeah.
Now, that may change if we have more closures, but right now that's where it's at.
It was very different a few years ago when we were all scrambling trying to get newsprint.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
So it's definitely cyclical.
Yep.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about transportation. Russ, maybe you can give us an overview from your perspective of the different modes that you use for transportation. And I know all the times I hear, oh, we don't have trucks, we don't have drivers, all these sorts of things that you guys have to manage.
Sure. Well, not to go old school on you, but in my, first couple of years at Gannett, I think I remember the mix of rail to truck being, 60% rail that we would receive and 40% truck. And as a company today, I would tell you the amount of rail that White Birch ships is probably less than 10% of what we do in total. Rail has, and that's for a number of different reasons, obviously, which you guys see firsthand. That volume level and the ability to compete effectively with rail rates with a gradually declining volume level, as well as moving print locations, and the idea of a rail siding is nowhere near as important today as it was back in those days. Combine that with the new driver rules, and there's no gaming the system anymore. These guys are only going to drive a certain amount of time, and we are endorsers of those rules that create more safety on the road. But increasingly, we've all seen it become more and more difficult to put a truck bid out there, try and do everything we can on our end to be the most efficient, low cost guy that we can. And you get a great bid on something, and, this guy wins 20 loads a week within your bid process, and he only shows up with 5 trucks. So, we have to balance the reliability of a supplier on your behalf, or a trucker on your behalf as our customers, because, we've got to hit dates. I will back to the inventory question as it relates to transportation. One of our challenges has been your challenge, as you've, as an industry, have reduced headcount. We have very much seen that into the sort of impact our business as the windows that we are able to deliver to the press rooms. And it's a fact of life and something that we have to deal with. But if you really want to see a circus, see somebody get down to a couple of days of paper and amazingly still tell us that, here's the hour and a half that you have to deliver the paper, where we're begging them, listen, we can get the paper there by 9 o'clock in the morning. Just please have somebody there to deliver. So it's it definitely is more challenging. Maybe the one upside of some of the capacity closures is it frees up volume in transportation. So certainly where our mills in Quebec are, anytime you have a capacity movement, you end up, with more availability of chips, more availability of trucks, but call a duck a duck. The paper industry is not sexy to the rail industry anymore. We try hard to be sexy for the truckers, but again, we can only afford to do what we can do.
And the impact that we've seen here at the Times is, speaking about rail thinking paper is not sexy, we used a third-party warehouse located in the Bronx that was actually owned by the rail line. And because they saw an actual decrease in paper volume coming in over the past few years, New Haven has actually been notified that their lease is not being renewed, and they're looking for alternative business to go into that location. The word is it's going to be Amazon, but what's happening is with the reduction in consumption and the less need for rail cars, it's not only impacting us directly in our press rooms, it's impacting our third-party warehouses that help supply some of the product into the press rooms.
Thank you. What about, you mentioned third-party warehouses. Do you get a lot of damaged newsprint with the multiple handling of the rolls when you have to go to a warehouse and double handle?
We haven't, at the Times, we haven't seen anything significant. Most of the damage that comes in is usually identified as soon as it's taken off of the rail car. So any kind of damage that we see in the press room would really have to be hidden damage, or like Larry said, it could be a poor setup on press, so it would be press room damage. Very, 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 very limited amount of damage on incoming rolls from a third party. We tend to see maybe a little bit more if it's cross-docked, because then there's that added handling. But through a third party, no, not really.
Yeah, same here. We see very rarely the damage, but when it does happen, the most recent examples have been rail cars that, did go through some type of mishap and circled the country a few months, and eventually show up and the paper's just been beaten up from all the movement. But that's really been an exception, not the norm.
Have there been, from a transportation perspective, there have been difficulties crossing the border between Canada and the U.S.?
Are you speaking in the COVID timeframe?
Yes. Yes.
Really, no. I would say that the both governments did a very good job of keeping trade and all of those things that might slow down trade, keeping those barriers down. As somebody mentioned earlier, there was I would say a certain amount that the rules in Canada are fairly strict, that when you come back through over the border into Canada, you are required to quarantine for 14 days, no matter what. How they manage that specifically as it relates to these truckers is, quite honestly, I'm not familiar with the dirty details of that. But we have not seen any real impact, other than, I would say, the availability of that capacity to just generally drivers who didn't want to cross the border and for their own health reasons. Sorry.
One thing I often thought about is there a way we can share some of our truck capacity in locations that are close enough to your mills, where we could work together to haul newsprint for you. Just something I think we haven't pressed on enough, because it's the same miles whether you're going up empty or back empty. And I don't know whether there's a lot of back hauls with some of with newsprint. I'm just not that familiar with it, but often something I thought about. I know the trucks have to be back to run operations, but these days a lot of time we have excess trucks in the facilities.
Yeah, a lot of the process for a paper manufacturer would be that bid process, as I described. And these guys, you're either on the front end or the back end of what they're trying to do as a company. So they're either getting your business and looking for the backhaul to create a non-deadhead situation, or you are their solution to business that they already have in that particular lane. We have had and do have certain customers that choose to pick their paper up at the mill. I will tell you that most paper mills do not like that because it decreases their flexibility. If they had you on the machine schedule for Friday at noon and something else comes up, they push you to Saturday at noon, because are you really going to know the difference between getting it Monday or Tuesday? When that guy's waiting at your door, you got to have the paper ready. So a lot of mill managers will say, no, I don't want that kind of business in my shop.
Okay, interesting. Well, we're getting close to our time limit. So I'm going to go to each member, and maybe you can sum up, or you may not have anything to sum up. That'd be okay. So I'll start with you, Russ. Anything to sum up in general?
I don't. I would, I appreciate the time. I think it's always good for, a little bit of conversation and deeper understanding. I would, say that, as Frank and others mentioned, we are seeing things get better. I'm hopeful. Your industry, obviously we are a component of your industry, but you are our industry. So, our collective health as an industry is dependent on how you guys do. And that being said, all of the, some of this discussion can sound a little bit dark, and the Darwinism of the current market that we're in kind of dictates that, things are going to happen. There can't be the same level of paper in the market that there is today. And we just got to get through this together. So thank you again.
Thank you, Russ. Larry?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for inviting me to the panel. I do appreciate the opportunity. I mean, similar to what Russ said, I mean, we all live in the same ecosystem. The suppliers, the newspapers, we all deal with the same thing. It's interesting though, individual publishers and or corporate groups that own them, yeah, they're making decisions at a very local level. What do I not produce a Monday paper or a Saturday paper? And those little decisions have, I'll say, some of us, they have large implications, but in general, they have these smaller implications. But we're seeing those smaller implications, add up and add up and add up. When one of our suppliers, whether it's a newsprint supplier or a plate maker or somebody who makes ink, because there are fewer of them than there are newspapers, when one of them makes a decision, it affects the market, probably much more greatly than it would an individual newspaper. So I think we all have to keep that in mind. The other thing I will say is I think to the extent that if you're not thinking globally, you probably will need to think globally on your supply base over the next several years. I mean, certainly North America, whether it's newsprint or anything else, it's not going away. But as things get smaller, we're going to have to just keep more of an eye on what's happening around the world. So I think that'll probably be a change in more of our thinking. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you for joining the panel. Gary?
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Years ago when I was at the Gazette in Colorado Springs, I used to tell the people in the press room, you're not just making a paster, you're not just putting a roll on a reel stand. We're doing something much more important in keeping our communities informed. And though this conversation today has been, entirely focused on newsprint, what we're doing is much more important than just newsprint. I mean, the local journalism, that's really what matters. And what I was really encouraged about today was the collaboration and the partnership that we have with everybody. And I think it was displayed here so well with, in some cases, we're competitors, Page is competitors with folks, but it doesn't really matter at this point in time. We want to partner together to help each other out to make sure that our communities stay informed. And I think that's really the crux of what I wanted to say. I'm having been around for such a long time. I'm a bit sentimental about it, but it really is important to me. So for everybody that was on this panel and for Mike and Mark and you, Wayne, for moderating it, I'm very grateful that we were able to talk together and show this partnership and this collaboration amongst everyone. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Gary. Very well said. Lisa?
First of all, I want to thank everyone for asking me to join this panel. It's been a pleasure discussing our issues and concerns that we have. I know that we have some continued challenges ahead. Nobody knows where we're headed. I think that we just need to keep doing what we're doing, trying to manage the operations as best we can, because our health is very, very critical to all of our paper suppliers, our ink suppliers, and we're integrated. So it's very important that we keep the communications open and just hope that this situation tries to improve over time and we get to reap some of the benefits from it. Try to be positive about it.
Thank you very much. We need more positivity in our
Yes.
industry, that's for sure. And we'll wrap up with Frank.
Oh, it's all been said. And our 8 core newsprint producers here in North America are critical to our business. We highly value the product they make, the quality, the runnability, the service, the communication. It all goes together as a complete package. And we are, as I think everyone has already said, so tightly dependent upon each other. So we look forward to the future and appreciate this opportunity to share our thoughts on newsprint. Thanks, Wayne.
You, Frank. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists. I want to thank ING and E&P for helping us put this up. And we turn it back to Mark and Mike.
Go ahead, Mark. How do you want to wrap this thing up?
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for your participation. It's just encouraging to see how passionate everybody is with their business and the integration and collaboration with everyone. We now need to just sort of plan to meet and participate in Chicago next year, hear the differences and experiences of the group over the 18-month period that we've been experiencing. This will be a dynamic reunion, and I think everybody's going to have a much greater sense of participation. So let's look forward to seeing you guys next year and make the most of it. Stay involved, stay engaged. Cooperation is going to be what helps us get through this. Visit us on internationalnewspaper.org. Follow us on LinkedIn. And Mike, over to you.
Well, I had been communicating with the home office at the America's Newspapers, Greg Watson, who said this is a very popular session. We had lots of requests for the recording. So I want to let you know, he'll be forwarding me that file later today. I will be posting it at editorandpublisher.com. Hopefully by first thing tomorrow morning, you'll find it under industry news. We just had a request, where the heck can I watch the All-Star Awards? Mark, that was fun when you and I surprised a few people virtually. I would like to do it face-to-face. They were posted today at editorandpublisher.com. If you click on industry news, scroll down the page, you can watch the fun that Mark and I had earlier this week, surprising some great All-Stars, both on a local level and a national level, on how well they do. And if I may just sum up, because we only have about 2 more minutes left, some of you know my background. I know nothing about what you guys do. I just love the rumble of the press and the smell when I was working in buildings, but I spent 21 years generating advertising revenue, 50% of that print, for this industry as a consultant, and 10 years before that, selling radio and television advertising. So I just became a publisher for the first time in my life at the ripe old age of 62 last year when I took over E&P. And when I was at the mega conference pre-COVID, people came over to me and said, "How does it feel to be a publisher?" And I said, I never fulfilled an ad in my life. I just sold them. I want you to know a secret that I've learned. And they all, Francis Wick come up to me, ask me, "Nick Monaco, what did you learn?" I said, "Paper and postage are expensive." That's what I have learned, gentlemen and ladies. So you have done you do a wonderful service for the industry, for people like us, to keep the things rolling, to keep that content coming out. And I know very, very well that we're going to be on the backside of this. And pros like you and all those in the operations sector are going to keep us getting that essential news product out. So thank you. On behalf of Editor and Publisher, International Newspaper Group, it's been an honor and pleasure to host this session. Once again, when you're looking for the recording, editorandpublisher.com. Check it out. It'll be there either later this afternoon or first thing in the morning. Everybody stay well and healthy. Bye-bye.